Hi, and welcome to this installment of Frank and Mary here in Southborough. If you haven't seen this show before, my name is Art Bergeron. My day job is as an elder law attorney at Myrick O'Connell up the street in Westborough, but this is not about my day job. If you've gone to my presentations at the Senior Center, or if you've seen any of my stuff on my YouTube channel, you know that this is about my friends Frank and Mary. Frank and Mary's goal in life is very simple. They want to live in their house until they die. They want to be buried in the backyard. If you identify with that and you want to stay right here in Southborough, then the show is really for you. And it's about the people you should know about and the programs you should know about to do just that. Now, and my wonderful co-host, Doug Peck, has been living here for years and years. His day job is actually working with seniors all the time at Seniors Helping Seniors. But we've really focused this show. We've been doing it for a few years now. And it was all about, we initially were just doing issues that were directly connected to seniors. And then we realized that it's really about helping you be informed about what is going on in town, because you're not just a senior, you're like a person who lives in town. And that's why we have broadened our view, our guests. But first I want to introduce Doug so that he can introduce our guests, including the famous Pamela Francis, back by popular demand for another month. Doug.
Well, I guess I don't have to introduce Pam. Hopefully a lot of people know her.
Thank you.
She's been around for a while. She's certainly more than a rumor in her own mind. But in keeping with what you just said, we have Rob Anderson here today. Rob is chairperson for one of the many committees that we have that really it takes to run a town. And they're all volunteer committees. He's the chairperson of the Economic Development Committee. And I thought that was particularly important given there's a town meeting coming up. We're going to discuss budgets, we're going to discuss finances, and this is a little bit about who's sort of watching the economic development. And I want folks to know, get a little bit acquainted with some of the projects, et cetera. But for right now, Pam is going to just step in for a few minutes and talk about what's going on at the Senior Center, because, we're back, I think, I hope.
Are we back, Pam?
I think so. We are well on our way. We are running our regular programs, all our fitness classes. We are running all our activities. And now we're switching over. We're going to even start running bus trips coming up in the spring. So that was kind of the final piece to really looking like we're on our way. So we've got some trips coming up starting in May and June. And we will run some of those in the summer. The other thing is, with a little luck, hopefully we will be doing some construction on this building in the summertime, which makes things interesting because that will kind of put our lawn out of commission. So we're looking at doing some off-site programs at some local restaurants and maybe do our barbecue off-site. So there'll be some interesting things going on. A couple of things I wanted to mention. One is we've got a couple of gentlemen here that do one-on-one classes or help seniors with electronic devices. So if you have questions about your phone or your laptop or whatever it be, you can always sign up here and have an hour with them on how do I do this, or how do I fix this, or as they said to me today, when I asked them, how do I arrange my pictures on my phone? If you've got questions like that, whether it's a one-shot deal or if you want kind of to start using a laptop or one of those devices, they do a fantastic job. So that's coming up. We also have something called Get On Board that's happening, where it's going to be a discussion with one of our local departments or local committees. We have the police department coming in to do a talk and answer any of the questions that people have. We're also having one with Youth and Family Services, so people can get a better understanding of what they do. And I may mention to Rob that might be something that we can work with him on as far as the Economic Development Committee. Come on over and maybe we can do one of those with your group and inform people more of what's going on there. So we've got a lot of things coming up, and yeah, I'm hoping in the next few months we will be back to or well on our way to whatever normal is going to be in the future. So thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
great,
Pam.
Man. That's great. We really appreciate you coming on. And I think this really gets to kind of the heart of the show, which is for folks who are a lot of times at home, maybe not tremendously technologically savvy. This is probably a great way to keep people in
Mhm.
touch. And going back to what Pam just said, you ought to go. I mean, you're doing these people for the techies who are there to help you out. You're doing them a favor. They love being able to show off that they can do all this stuff, right?
Mhm.
I don't feel like, oh, I can't believe I'm putting myself out. You are giving them the great ability to show off. So please go, right?
Yes.
It can really help you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
come and you don't have to ask your kids.
Right. Right, because they
Yeah.
are the worst to deal with. They're always,
Yes.
let me put it this way, these people will not roll their eyes.
No,
Right.
they'll be very
These
patient.
will always roll their eyes when you
Yeah.
ask these guys, right?
They're older guys, so they're
Right.
good. They're
Yeah,
good.
they'll be very patient with you. So come on over.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Pam.
Pam.
Thanks,
All
guys.
right.
Have a good
So,
show.
Rob,
Take care.
yep. How are you? You're a longtime Southborough resident, or are you relatively
Well,
new? Or?
as my wife often says about our marriage, it seems like a lifetime. But we have been living in Southborough since 2007.
Okay.
So I suppose I'm still kind of new to the town.
Yeah.
But it's a great community. We ended up in Southborough because it was nearby the commuter rail station. We both worked in Boston. So we used to take the train all the time.
Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, good. So tell us a little bit about the Economic Development Committee.
Oh,
What's sort of its
sure.
main mission.
Oh,
Yeah.
before you start that, Rob,
Okay.
I'm gonna for the benefit of people who are thinking about, so what are they doing again? So
Okay.
I used to chair the Marlborough Economic Development Corporation, which does very similar things. And I remember going to the city council once, and I said, and I did this visuals, and I said, so remember now, your budget is like a pie, right? And you see these pies, and I did like the little pie chart, and the police get a piece, and the fire department gets a piece, and the schools get a piece, and everybody gets a piece of the pie. And then there's this other pie, which is the income. And the income comes from tax revenue, and it comes from the state, and it comes from this and that. And then I just did a picture of a pizza, a little pizza. And then I did a picture of a big pizza. I said, what does economic development do? We grow the pie. We grow the pie so that there's more money for everybody, but nobody's having to pay more in taxes. So there's nothing more important than the Economic Development Committee.
Yeah.
And there is no department that is dealing with this other than the Economic Development Committee. It's a really important job. So that's my pitch.
No, and definitely. The one thing I would say, and this is very appropriate since at last town meeting, we did pass some zoning changes. The Economic Development Committee works in collaboration with the Select Board and the Planning Board, because getting permits for businesses quickly saves them money. And if you are a community that streamlines the permitting, you are going to have a better chance, and it's not going to happen all the time, but you're going to have a better chance to attract those businesses. And if you have a select board that buys into the vision of economic development growth, and that growth can be both in businesses, restaurants, there's also a housing component to that as well. And Arthur, hitting upon your idea of Frank and Mary who want to live in Southborough for their full life. Maybe they don't want to live in a single family home because they're getting older and want a different diversity of housing. Maybe they want to downsize to an apartment or a condo. So housing is a component to economic development as well. And so the Economic Development Committee, I've been chairing for about a year and a half, is kind of focused on where that growth can happen, what type of growth we want to happen, and what are some of those impediments to making that occur. And so zoning is one, wastewater is another, and kind of identifying those areas where we can have more significant growth is kind of some of the stuff we work on a pretty regular basis.
So what's your background for this, Rob?
Well, I have been working in economic development in Massachusetts for close to 20 years. Okay. So I've worked with a nonprofit called MassEcon that worked with companies undergoing the site selection process, the analysis that they would go through into why they would choose a community. And those could be things like the workforce around there, transportation. Obviously where the CEO lives, because sometimes a short commute is what the CEO wants.
Yeah.
And then I worked for the state's Office of Business Development, administering the tax incentive program. And that's kind of a way in which municipalities can incentivize companies to make their investments and add jobs. I spent some time in municipal economic development as well. So
Okay.
that's kind of giving me an inside view as from when the company contacts you through the permitting process, through the ribbon cutting at the end. And now I'm working for another statewide economic development organization, Mass Development, which does financing for businesses. So it's kind of a varied career, but it kind of gets to the end goal of what economic development is and what Arthur said. It's a larger pie. I also sometimes say a rising tide lifts all boats. So it's that collaboration, not only within Southborough, but with our surrounding communities like Marlborough and Westborough and Framingham, where if we strengthen the Metro West economy, there are going to be people who live in Southborough who might work in Westborough, and the same thing can happen as well, particularly on the Route 9 corridor. And the Route 9 corridor is kind of where, from an economic development perspective, the EDC is putting its greatest emphasis right now.
Which also makes sense. You know, that's kind of like where the real potential. And I suppose the background that you had, especially at Mass Econ, where you were actually talking to companies who were in the process of picking and choosing.
Yes.
So that you kind of get into their heads, and for the consultants that they hire to do all of those things. And so you really have that sense of, so what is, you know, we all want to guess at what is important to a company, but what's really important to a company? You know, what's really important.
It's the number one thing is the workforce. And so it's sometimes for some of the life science R&D companies, it's the educated workforce, the people with the advanced degrees. And so they will actually draw those circles. And there's a reason why a lot of R&D companies end up in the Cambridge, Harvard, MIT area. Then there are other companies who are looking for people with a different skill set, machinists, more blue collar. And they'll kind of identify where it would be most applicable for them to locate. But the number one thing, no matter what, is the workforce. And so, you know, from Southborough's perspective, we have a highly educated workforce, a mobile workforce based upon the location, right by 495, the Mass Pike, and the commuter rail. So because we have a mobile workforce, sometimes that mobile workforce leaves the community and we don't necessarily get people, the businesses coming in along Route 9. But, you know, based upon all of my years of experience, it always comes down to the workers. And back in the day, my dad or grandfather's generation, someone would put up a mill and then people would move to those mill cities to work. It has shifted. Those companies will actually identify where their workforce is and locate there. And so it's kind of a different change. And so from an economic development perspective, thinking about zoning and thinking about those amenities and the infrastructure in place, communities have to be flexible. And I think that's one of the things that the EDC is trying to do right now.
And I suppose it's an interesting point about, you know, how where companies used to locate. You locate, well, you know, the stuff in Marlborough was there were shoe shops because the railroad had just extended to Marlborough, so that you could export what had been produced closer to Boston. You could export the jobs to here, right? And it worked better. And then the employees kind of showed up. And then you have all these places like Hudson and so many, or like Framingham, that built along the river because there was power on the river and you needed to clean the. Whereas now, as you say, they're chasing the workers themselves. They're actually chasing. So the housing component to what you're doing becomes a really important component, because the other stuff, I remember hearing one of the terms from one of the larger companies that moved to Marlboro. He said, you think that it's about the taxes and that's all chump change. We spend 80% of our money on workers, right? So the question is, how do the workers feel? Are the workers happy? Are the workers sad? How do the work? So it's a
Yeah.
very different way of thinking about the companies and stuff.
It's definitely.
So we in some ways we think about it as being, larger companies, and we've had a few in Southborough, particularly going back to Data General and places like that. But I was looking at one of your agendas that you have a small business grants program. So how's the climate for smaller businesses in Southborough nowadays?
It's very difficult, and there are two things that adversely affect small business. The first one is the pandemic. The past 2 years have made it extremely difficult for small businesses, particularly if you need people coming through the door. And the pandemic has also accelerated the second thing, which is a detriment to small businesses, which is Amazon and online delivery.
Yeah.
And so both of those things make it a little bit more difficult. So one of the initiatives from the EDC is trying to pay attention to those small businesses and market them as much as possible, get them those things that they might need in order to be more successful. Last year, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Marika, who is our economic development coordinator, who does a fabulous job. She went after a grant and got grants for tents that could be used by restaurants for outdoor dining last year.
Oh.
And so that was one way in which the EDC, through our EDC coordinator, actually helped small businesses. But to your point, a lot of those small businesses have been adversely affected a great deal by the pandemic. So that particular grant was useful. Hopefully, we're able to get more grants in the future to help them out.
No, it's interesting. It's become so important to restaurants to have some type of outdoor seating and space available. Absolutely.
I listen. I loved Hola and Tommaso.
Yeah.
Sitting in there over the summer. I wish the weather were getting better now, so I could do more of that. But that'll be coming in the future, I think.
Yeah. So looking at other parts of businesses, how business friendly are we? Is there anything other major thing that you're working on generally for businesses? It seems like we should be a business friendly town, but I don't know.
We are. The thing is that as you move away from, let's call it a little bit more blue collar to more advanced manufacturing, there is an infrastructure gap in Southborough that is difficult to overcome. We don't have sewer.
Yeah.
And so, like, if, for example, people said, well, we're like right between two communities that have life sciences, Westboro and Framingham. Why don't we have any there? We don't have the sewer infrastructure. So even if you're doing R&D or if you're looking to do biomanufacturing, sewer is an issue. And so that's the infrastructure thing that isn't necessarily making us less business friendly. It's putting up a roadblock to sometimes having those further in-depth conversations, which we want to do. Which is why the EDC has gone after particular grants to take a look at the Route 9 corridor to see if there is some way for a town-owned wastewater treatment to actually get that onto Route 9, or whether or not there's the opportunity to partner with a private developer for something that could be strung out along Route 9 to make that happen. So to your question, I think we are business friendly. As I mentioned at the beginning, the select board and the planning board are our partners in this. And we have a initiative to visit businesses in town. We just had one, is last week or the week before, where the EDC went and spoke with Ferris Development, who just bought the CAS building. And their there are more goals for us to go out and visit businesses as possible. Sometimes businesses just want to hear from the town that we're here if anything comes up. So I would say we are. You can always be better. But the fact that we've got a great economic development coordinator makes it that much easier for us to do.
Good to know.
And I suppose that piece of just going out there is such a, there's so much information on how the best place you grow your business, you grow your stuff is by growing your stuff, you know, not by getting transplants from someplace else, but by seeing companies that are there, who like it there, and whose CEO especially likes it there, and therefore want to grow there. And I remember once again doing the Marlboro stuff. That's one of the things that we have regular meetings of the Economic Development Corporation, and the mayor reports in.
Yes.
And the mayor will talk about every one of the companies that he has visited over the previous quarter, because there's nothing more important to him. And he didn't appreciate this, I think, and before we did this we started the Economic Development Corporation, right? But now he realizes that, it isn't like what's great about just going to visit them is that they're not looking for anything then. You're just going out to visit them. And they're like happy, they're like surprised to see you. Oh, wow, you're actually coming to see me, and you're not asking me for anything, and I'm not asking you for anything. But that way they feel like, oh, they're not used to dealing with government. So their notion of, oh, do I have to, where do I start? And oh, it's bureaucracy and blah, 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 just gives them a very different feel. So it's great that you're doing that.
You can be noticeable by your absence. And Meredith does a great job in Marlboro.
Yeah.
And the thing is, she is known. And so the one thing that I hope that the EDC continues to do is maintain our visibility as a key point of contact for developing those relationships. It's like farming. You plant a seed, and then when that tree grows, you have spent time nurturing it so that you get the fruits from that labor. And so I think that's one of the things that hopefully indicates that Southborough is business friendly and that we're going to continue to grow.
Doug, can I ask one more? I know
Sure.
one
No,
of
go
my
ahead.
jobs, as folks know, is to be I
No,
provide
no,
comic relief and keep time. And I'm glancing every once in a while because I'm just watching at time, because this is a really interesting conversation. But if Doug, if you don't mind my asking,
Go ahead.
You've obviously thought about this a lot, and you know what land is available, and you know what the Southborough of today is in terms of those economic development components. If you were thinking about it, right? What would the Southborough of tomorrow would be in terms of those economic development components? How would it change?
It would be a very good question. I think one of the things that we need to build upon is the MBTA station. It's a great connector into the city. So there has to be a way to get residents to that station, whether or not it's bike paths, walking trails, get people out of their cars so they can walk, because Route 9 traffic is really bad. And most of the Route 9 traffic is coming from Worcester heading towards Framingham and the Pike. So you want to get people out of their cars and into the businesses. So you take a look at the Route 9 corridor and you think about developing that area first with some density. And density is not a bad term, because with that density comes further tax revenue for infrastructure investments through the rest of the town. So I would say that the Southborough of the next 10 or 15 years, which will be represented in our master plan, is going to have a little bit more density, but not density in what are traditionally residential neighborhoods. The focus is going to have to turn towards Route 9 and what's going to happen there.
That's great. That's great.
Oh, good.
Well, Doug,
That's
this was a
excellent.
great idea. This was Doug's idea to bring you on. He said, oh, this would just be a really interesting piece for a lot of folks. And, you know, there were a ton of Frank and Marys out there, and they're taxpayers, you know.
Yeah,
And it's, you know, and they're like, oh, there's all this traffic, and oh, it's changing so much, and blah, 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 you know. So to give people a sense of kind of globally, where, you know, what you're doing and how that's contributing to really,
mhm,
among other things, that their tax rate, which is a very reasonable rate, is
Mhm.
really great. Is really
Mhm.
great.
Yeah.
I think it's good to know just there's somebody even thinking about this and planning around it rather than just having haphazard growth.
Right.
Because you can't do that nowadays. It really does have to be a well thought out plan. We have capital planning. It's all very integrated, and it's just how shows you how much work goes into really keeping a town, the town you want to live in. You know,
Right.
supported by the people that live here. So
Yes.
And
thank
so you
everybody
keep
for
the
their
pie
service.
growing so that you can keep it the town you want to live in while not getting
Yeah.
killed on your tax bill, right?
Well,
Yep,
see, and that's,
absolutely.
and Arthur, that's a very good point, because costs continue to go up. Capital, you have to do roadways, you have to do all of these initiatives. You actually need growth in order to, with that growth allows the residential tax rate to remain small. So
Mhm.
it's trying to come up with that strategy on how you have that growth, so you keep the residential tax rate low without changing the full character of the town.
Right.
And so there are small things like the zoning in the downtown, which offers a little bit of housing, but not a whole bunch of density, which could be useful long-term to keep the character, but still see some new construction.
Mhm.
Route 9 as the major commuting thoroughfare is primed for a revisioning and perhaps some zoning changes and some infrastructure improvements to get that density and growth without adversely affecting the character in the town that we really love to live in. So
Yeah.
I think that's the tricky issue that the EDC is trying to address.
Yeah,
So folks, stay tuned to all of that.
yeah.
And Rob, you know, as these things progress, especially if you're heading toward a town meeting and you want folks to know kind of where you're going, it'd be great to have you come back on the show. It'd be
Yeah.
great. So Doug,
I
Doug, thanks a million. Rob, thanks a million. I'm watching it time. I know we're a little bit
Yeah.
close because it was so interesting. Thank you very much. And folks, so these guys, once again, these are volunteers. They are working for you,
Yeah,
but they are working in a very important thing, helping you keep your taxes reasonable while at the same time keeping Marlborough wonderful.
Yeah.
So thank you
Good.
very much, all. I hope you enjoyed the program. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next installment of Frank and Mary here in Southborough. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks again, Rob.
Thanks. Okay, bye-bye.